Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. I've planned a great program for today, but first, a word from our sponsor, locumstory.com. Locumstory.com is a free, unbiased educational resource about locum tenens. It's not an agency. Locum Story answers your questions on their website, podcast, webinars, videos, and they even have a Locums 101 crash course. Learn about locums and get insights from real-life physicians, PAs, and NPs at locumstory.com. My guest today is Dr. Matthew Hermann. Matt is a radiologist and founder of the TeleRadiology company RightReadMD. He's here to tell us his background in medicine and how he became an entrepreneur. Perhaps he'll weigh in on the future of telemedicine and offer some financial advice to younger physicians as well. Welcome, Dr. Hermann.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you allowing me on the show today.
Yeah, well, we haven't done a teleradiology program, and I remember I used to work a lot of locum tenens. I remember one night I was at a hospital that I didn't know, and I got a call at like 2 in the morning from a radiologist about I had a critical patient and the CT scan, and he started talking about it. And I said, this was quite a while ago. And I said, why don't I just come down and we can look at it together? And he goes, well, because it's not really going to work. He goes, I'm in Iowa, and I think I was in South Dakota. He goes, I'm in my basement. And it's like, what? I think there was a company, Nighthawk. Do they still exist? Something like that.
Yeah, they evolved into one of the bigger
Uh,
private equity players. Yeah.
but that was my intro into this concept. So I don't know, you're minding your own business, a studious medical student. And so how did this happen?
From medical student to teleradiologist, I would say that what happened, because no one really goes to medical school not to see people. So I was interested in radiology because of interventional. And then I actually did a fellowship in pain medicine, but I was at Stanford. And then after that, in terms of just the market, it just seemed like it was just a little more opportunistic for me to go into the radiology space. So I didn't do pain medicine, and I just started reading remotely for a hospital system as a dedicated radiologist. And then I switched to full teleradiology when I moved to Puerto Rico.
Right. So, a radiology seems perfectly suited for this because, I mean, even at the hospital, the radiologist is reading down in the radiology department and the
Right.
patient's, upstairs, but he could be reading in Puerto Rico. It doesn't really matter, with the quality now of digital films. I'm still calling them films, right? So digital, MRIs or whatever it is, you can send them along on the internet and they show up in just as good shape as when they left. And it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference where you are.
Yeah, I think there's some advantages. I think for teleradiology is really good for off hours radiology coverage because usually it's emergent directed questions such as does this person have appendicitis? Where's the aneurysm? I think that's allowed radiology to be commoditized, but I think for studies where it's such as like tumor follow-ups or things where you need chart access, that's where it's good to have a permanent radiologist that might be a dedicated reader. But yeah, I definitely see that point. I think that's why radiology's kind of gone where it's gone.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not concur because there is nothing better than continuity. And continuity of care is always a good thing. And we struggle with that where I work. I work in downtown Memphis at the county hospital, and we are surrounded by 5 other hospitals within a 5-mile radius. And it just never fails that we'll get a very complicated patient who's been to all 4, of the other
Yeah.
hospitals, and the records don't transmit easily. And we're always reinventing the wheel. And it's like, can't you just pick one hospital and go there so we
Yeah.
would have all of your stuff? That would be a great cost saver and help patients. I mean, one day that will happen. But making it happen, it's just a lot of, we've done other shows on that, the political and economic challenges. But yeah, nothing
Right.
better than having the same rate. Gee, I read that study a week ago. Let's take another look. And
Right.
that's just wonderful. I was out of practice for a while. This must go back almost 20 years doing full time medical journalism. And when I came back, what was different was there were these computer screens all over the hospital that in the old days, every doctor would go down to radiology at 7 in the morning with a cup of coffee, talk to the radiologist about their patient. Somebody, you may not be old enough to remember this, but put up the films, would literally hang the films on this rotating thing. And we would
Right,
all look at them and we would talk about them. And you would get a curbside consult. You turn to your buddy and you say, maybe it's a GI thing. Maybe you ought to see him, or a surgical. Could you do a so a lot of business was done in that first hour because everybody had to see the films from the day before, and all the films were in the radiology department, and that was the only way you could do it. And when I came
right,
back, all of a sudden there's these screens everywhere, and you could just pull up the image and the report because now the reports were dictated, instantly, which was not the way it was done. You had to wait a couple days in the old days to get the report. So that's why you had to go down, the next day and talk to the radiologist because somebody was busy typing it somewhere. But that's all gone. So there's instantaneous report and instantaneous film. And then the question is, well, what about the sort of the unwritten input from the radiologist? Because I was in the
right,
habit of discussing the film with the radiologist. I even talked to a radiologist who told me, I really miss the old days. It's kind of lonely down here now. He considered himself a consultant, that
right.
and now, yeah, I mean, so now we do it on the phone. We say, okay, can you pull up image 26-17, on this MRI? And we can kind of do it that way. But I take the residents physically to radiology at least a couple times a week. So it's usually a fellow or a resident that we can talk with. And it's just amazing the insights you get from being in person that you don't get, in a remote setting. So I'm going to emphasize that that's always better. But on the other hand, a lot of times you don't need those insights and you need coverage, which is the other issue, right? And
Right. Right. I totally agree. I think for large, I think that's the downside of private equity commoditizing radiology is that it's viewed as something like any other commodity. But in the past 10 years, University of Michigan came out with a study that when general surgeons round with radiologists on whether or not to operate, it influences their decision by 36% about whether to or not operate. And so I think for health systems that can have dedicated radiologists that work for them and have chart access and are get known by their colleagues there rather than being like in a fractional pool that's with 1,000 other hospitals just all mixed in. I think we're starting to see the downsides of that with patient quality. There's things that are, I guess you call them like implicit costs or costs that aren't necessarily seen on a balance sheet, and that's lawsuits, sentinel events, communication breakdowns, things that you may have seen because you've seen both models.
it's great to hear you say that. I actually wasn't expecting that point of view. So very
Right,
refreshing. So you got into this, you were a teleradiologist, you were dedicated. Well, you were an offsite radiologist full
right,
time. And then you said, I could live in Puerto Rico and do this, right?
right.
And so then what happened? I mean, it's not, how do you start a company? To me, that seems kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, so I moved to Puerto Rico and I didn't start a company. I just was a contractor. So I just had my own little LLC and was 1099. My wife and I try to do an adventure every 5 years. So the last adventure was riding my bicycle across the United States. And so then I wanted the next adventure to be go somewhere new. And it was from a tax perspective, I was advantaged. I had been working kind of remote in my old job. I would go on site if the computers went down and I had to be 10 minutes from a hospital. But we were in COVID and I just figured let's try something new because we were just in Pennsylvania and wasn't really aligning with what we wanted. And we just wanted to try to get in a new environment. And the people we knew down there was from a networking and social perspective, it was people that aligned with us and we could talk topics with them you wouldn't really talk about in suburban environments such as crypto and investing and markets. So it's been a good move for me.
So you are full-time located in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, even though I say this from I'm in the States right now, we're getting our house remodeled. I like living there. There's two types of people that move to Puerto Rico. There's people that are there just for the taxes and they're only there like 6 months in a week. Hard to form relationships with those people because you don't really see them as much. And then there's
Sure.
people like me who I'm there. I like living there, so I'm there as much as I can. I have friends there, both local and U.S. based. I'm, interested in the culture. I'm a full timer, so
Now, so if you can do this in a minute, what are the I know some states in the United States, like I live in Tennessee, and Tennessee does not have income tax. So some people will choose Tennessee for that reason. And there's a half dozen states or so that are like that. Other states like Massachusetts and Rhode Island, in addition to paying federal tax, you also pay a state income tax. What's the deal with Puerto Rico? Why is that appealing?
yeah. So in comparison, to, like if you look at the extreme, like Boston, where you pay borough tax and local tax and state tax, in Puerto Rico, you would pay if your company has less than 3 million in revenue, you would pay 2%. Then after 5 years or any other situations, 4% federal tax, and then there's no state tax. And besides that, the biggest thing I think could drive people there is you don't pay capital gains taxes on most asset classes. And so if you go ahead.
So the federal tax is not based on the same formula to say that I pay.
Correct. So let's say that you make $500,000, you'd probably be looking at a tax bill of maybe like 10,000 a year total, but then you still have to pay accountants and other stuff. But it really equates to maybe 5 to 7% of your burden of
Well, it would
income's
be
tax.
closer to 39% here.
Right. So it's pretty substantial. And then if you sell, let's say that you have $1 million in Tesla and you sell it in the States, you pay whatever capital gains rate it is. In Puerto Rico, it's 0%.
Whoa. So why doesn't everybody live there?
So visiting is different than living. Some people, the culture is different. I think a lot of people think they just set their little feet down and they just stop paying taxes. And it's a lot more complicated than that.
Hmm.
I'm a W-2 employee in my corporation. The infrastructure is different. Ever since Maria, 75% of professionals left. It has a declining population. You have to donate to the local community, and that's what we do. You have to own real estate. And so it's things are a lot harder in Puerto Rico than the States. I couldn't, I just went to Chicago for a business conference and I couldn't believe that I could get something to an Amazon locker in a day. I mean, in Puerto Rico, it'd probably take about a week. Yeah,
Right. So it is different, right?
right,
Um, and I actually, when I was working locums, I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, particularly the Philippines. And that's just like an entire other universe.
right.
And it is quite different. I lived there kind of like you, part-time, 3 months on, 3 months off, that sort of thing. And I loved it. And let's see. But there were two kinds, as you say, there were two kinds of foreigners there. There were foreigners that love the Philippines. It's beautiful. The people are friendly. There's beaches. It's warm. And then there were people that hated it. They were there because
Yeah,
their company sent them, and they just couldn't stand it because you'd want to get something done, and you couldn't even get an answer whether it was going to get done or not. It wasn't like how long do I have to wait. It was like, well, what are you even talking about? It
right,
was just it was
right. In Puerto Rico, there's definitely people like I'm there probably about 10, 11 months a year. This year, I'll be there 11 months. And usually, people there who are just there just for the taxes, they usually last about 3 years or whenever their company sells. And I don't have many of those friends because they complain a lot and they're just
right.
kind of telling you when they're going back to the States. Like for me, I'm just in a different earth than them. Like I like it and I like the people. I have a lot of friends.
Yeah, I think you got to embrace it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have. That's very exciting. Well, I know who I'm going to visit now when I'm on my way
Yeah.
to Puerto Rico. This sounds great.
Yeah.
And what about teleneurology? Do you have any slots for teleneurologists?
What my sister does? She's the head of telestroke at the VA, so I could get you in contact with her.
There we
Uh,
go. There we go. My employers, I don't think they watch the podcast, so I think we're good.
okay.
Okay, so you know, if so, I'm a resident hypothetically in
Right.
radiology. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, and I hear about this teleradiology thing. I could live in Puerto Rico. I mean, what's the downside of that?
The downside of living in Puerto Rico
No, of
is
teleradiology
of
as a career.
teleradiology. So I think right now the radiology job market's really good. I think that the problem is that things can change really rapidly. When I went into radiology, I thought I'd be a member of a private practice and have upside, and then I found out it really wasn't like that, and then I just became kind of a hamster in a large cog, and I kind of blue pilled into it. And when you see companies when they can get sold by private equity, you can see the value system change. And so um, I think that teleradiology is good, but if you're the type of person that maybe wants to be an entrepreneur or wants upside, you're not going to get that. It's just you just trade more time for money, and so I think that's the downside. Um, I think there's going to be newer models like mine that will hit the market where physicians can be rewarded for other metrics besides how much revenue they generate.
Right. I think for most physicians, the hamster wheel uh, plan is very unsatisfying.
Right.
Um, which is productivity, widgets. The more patients see, the more money you make. Well, there's a certain sense to that. But I'm in academic medicine, and when we get a patient who's very complicated, it takes a lot of time to review the chart, talk with other specialists, talk with the patient, examine them again. And, I explained to the residents, this is what we do. We're learning, we're teaching, we're helping. But when you're in private practice, a complicated patient is just wasting a lot of time. It's costing
Right.
you money. So, I mean, that's not a good alignment of incentives, right? Your
Right.
incentive should always be to take care of the patient. And frankly, one of the reasons I'm in academics is relieve somewhat of that productivity priority
Right.
burden. But of course, you need to get your work done for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was concerned about telemedicine in general is your colleagues. Where are they? You're in your bedroom or your basement, and like you said, when surgeons were consulting one on one in real, what do they call it, IRL, in real
Yeah.
life, with radiologists, the outcomes were better. So, as a career, do you think it's limiting for doctors just to be at home by themselves?
I think it depends on your personality type. I think in terms of the personality type of some radiologists, I think they're okay to be at home by themselves because they may have families or other needs. But I think one thing that can limit being at home is you might miss like corporate culture, interfacing with people. And so I think you can lose some intrinsic benefit being removed. But if you are regularly talking with providers, if that's your type of person, you get better patient care, and it's an asset, especially when providers get to know you.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Um, so what about doing teleradiology or telemedicine as a side gig? Does RightReadMD allow that? I say I want to do, I don't know, 20 hours a month, or is it a full-time sign up with you? How does that work?
The way we've structured our model is we try to find people to do salaried daytime work where they have chart access and the things that it's kind of like a unique selling proposition to hospitals because even though it's more expensive, it brings more value rather than being grouped into some enormous pool with 1,000 other hospitals. And so for daytime work, we really try to do a staffing arrangement where we're kind of the group that services the hospital. For off hours work, where it's more directed questions from the ER, we do teleradiology. Um, for because of the size of our company, we're not really at a point where we could have just people that just kind of pitch in as like a side hustle. I think one reason why a lot of larger companies you can have that is because they try to grow so aggressively and they have so many clients. There's always studies to read, which means horrible turnaround times. But if you're on the radiologist side, that means there's always work to do. You could always sign on and read a case. We're just structured a little bit differently than that.
Give me a ballpark number of how many radiologists work in Right Read MD.
It's about 8, and we're signing on some more. And then so we're on the smaller end. But right now, with active hospital interest, we're probably going to increase that by about probably about 8 to 10 in the next 6 months.
What about licensing?
Oh, we have in-house licensing and credentialing. That's Are you saying like the headache of having like 30 physician licenses?
Yes. What
Yeah,
explain that.
we manage that because I've done it myself and it's very tedious, time consuming, error prone. I think that's something where, if you think about it, let's say you're a radiologist and your time is worth $400 an hour or $600 an hour. That's your genius zone is reading studies. It's not looking to see what privileges you have at hospitals and when your next expiration date is.
At one point, I had 10 state licenses for locum tenens because, if you say, like me, I would be in Philippines for a few months and then say January 1, I want to be working. So I would have to tell my staffing agent, find me something January 1. Well, it might be in Minnesota or South Dakota or Arizona. But if you don't have a license, the guy with the license is going to get that assignment because by the time you get the license, there's that assignment's going to be taken. So
Right.
to position yourself well, there's no magic number. It just kind of depends. Right now, I'm down to I think 4 licenses. I got a few backups in case this Tennessee thing burns itself out. But you know, the keeping up with the licenses because they're all maturing on different days.
Right.
And these days they have different CME requirements. You have this one needs 2 hours of risk management, and this one needs 2 hours of HIV, and this one needs 3 hours
Hmm.
of hand washing. So I ended up with this giant spreadsheet, that at my rate probably costs tens of thousands of dollars to to keep going, right?
Yep.
Instead of that was not my genius zone. I did learn a lot more about Excel, but yeah. So, how many licenses would you guys need to sort of do what you do?
If you're a dedicated reader for a hospital, it's one. And then if you're doing teleradiology, it's more than that. I've just found out, especially from a CME perspective, that once you hit 25 state licenses, all your CME requirements can be met just by doing the requirements for each state for, hand washing, HIV, things like that. So for me personally, I try to hit like probably about 50 to 60 radiology specific category one CMEs, just so that I'm not keeping my CMEs only on child abuse in Pennsylvania or uh, hepatitis B in New York. So
Right. Better to just, well, I mean, the whole point of CME is to learn, right? And
yeah,
so, I like to do the ones where I'm learning something in addition to do the ones that I've done 10 times and probably don't have a whole lot left to learn about hand washing, but still have to do it. Yeah. So, you just take care of that in house, which makes a lot of sense.
right.
Um, People always ask about malpractice. How does that work for radiologists?
So it's cheaper for a group policy. So I have group policy where a radiologist will join and people ask about tail. That's all taken care of. I think that it's more expensive on an individual component than a group component. I just found out through applying that it's kind of done differently. My carrier, they just kind of incrementally increase the rate as the more radiologists you get, but the more people you have, the rate will go down. But interestingly enough, in malpractice, your yearly premium goes up because they're covering you for more years.
Right, because well, the tail effect, um,
Yeah.
and that depends on which state you're in, I guess, how long you're liable. But it can be a long number of years that a
Hmm.
case could surface from, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you're still responsible, uh,
Right.
legally. Okay. So what about, I'm thinking which suitcase I'm going to pack for Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
What kind of license? I've never had a Puerto Rico is not yet a state, if I'm not mistaken. So
Right.
how does that work? Does Puerto Rico have a medical license that's specific for Puerto Rico?
Yeah, from the Departamento de Salud, they have their own medical license, and you have to complete CMEs in Spanish, and you have to get recommendations from people in Puerto Rico. But they have their own licensing board, even though they're not a state in their U.S. territory. Everything's managed through them. And things are a little different. Like, even notaries down there, they're only lawyers. There's no, because it's all Spanish law, so there's no actual notary. You actually have to go to a lawyer to get something notarized. It's this whole process.
Hmm.
So that's what I had to do there for my licenses.
I heard what sounded like a pretty natural Spanish accent. Is that is is that
It's easy to
acquired?
shine in the States. It's easy to shine in the States. In Puerto Rico, if you speak Spanish, they'll say it's amazing if you don't know that much. In the States, if people don't speak perfect English, or it's just all a relative way you look at things. It's been acquired. I've gotten better. There's grades of language proficiency, and I would probably there's A to C, and I'm a solid B, but I'm working to get to C. But the only way you can do that is just maximize exposure. I go to jujitsu gym 3 to 5 times a week, and it's all in Spanish usually. And then I have lessons, and I aggressively try to speak Spanish with locals.
And so how do
So
you say ow in Spanish?
yeah, ow, but yeah, it's interesting for it depends for where you are, but in Colombia, where I'm only 2 hours from Medellin in Bogota. When I go there, the way to say cheese for a photo is you say whiskey. They actually say whiskey. So like when they're
Uh,
smiling before you take the photo, they'll be like
Whiskey.
whiskey. Yeah.
That sounds like some sort of World War II era American military kind of,
Yeah.
leftover thing from, and the Philippines. There are a lot of those things. Hi Joe. That goes back to World War II when they see a tall white guy that they don't know. Um, so it's fun to study cultures. I find that very stimulating. It sounds like it works really well for you.
Yeah, it's been going well. It's fun to talk to people and just you realize that sometimes what's projected is different than what's in reality. So every time there's a hurricane, people in the States will call me and they'll show me these horrific pictures and for me, I was like running outside during Fiona, all of our windows in our apartment leaked. And so we were, you know, going through about 30 towels an hour. But besides that, it wasn't horrible, but people thought I got swept away.
Hmm.
So
What
yeah,
about the power? Wasn't the power out for a while?
it's out a lot of the time. So I have a generator in my house. Most apartment buildings have dedicated generators. The infrastructure is decaying, and part of that's the population decrease and timeliness of reinvesting. But I have a cistern at my home and two internets, like we discussed before the show started. I have even Starlink, so three, and then I have you learn to have backups for backups. So
Right, Starlink, that's the Elon Musk system.
yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that more and more. There was a guy at the airport in Tonga a few weeks ago. I was visiting to see the humpback whales, and he had a Starlink in his backpack.
yeah,
And he said you could just take it with you, and as long as you had a plug to put it in, it would work.
yeah. Eventually, it'll be connected to your cell phone, so it kind of makes cell phone towers unnecessary. You'll just have a satellite phone.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
I've been following that. There was a satellite company. Oh, it must be 15 or 20 years. Iridium. You remember Iridium? And they were way ahead of their time, and they were doing just what Elon Musk has done, but I don't think they succeeded. They were literally ahead of their time, and the financial model collapsed before they could really make it work.
right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, technology continues to move along. Now, since technology continues to move along, what do you think the future is of what you're doing? I mean, are you going to sell out
Mhm.
in 3 years and go to the beach, or is this a lifelong thing? You think this telemedicine radiology is going to get bigger and bigger?
So for me personally, I'm at a point financially where I don't have to work anymore, but I'm doing this not for the money. So I'm doing this to because I feel value in giving jobs and patients, radiologists that are kind of a cut above the rest and they interact with the physician, the things we talked about. I think radiology being heavily commoditized makes sense to private equity because they try to grow, 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 accept as many contracts, buy radiology practices, take the radiologists like cattle and put them in a higher paying contract and then sell. And then the CEO will get like some sort of earnout based on KPIs and certain stages. It's part of my company resolution to never sell to private equity. My goal is to make it I don't even know what an ESOP is, but an employee-owned corporation. I'd like to have that in the future once the company's big enough to support that and have like a PEO where they can get benefits and be W-2s if they want. And so I think right now it's not, I think the differentiator will be showing that radiology, that a CT head is not the same thing as a ketchup bottle in the store, that it's a little more individualistic. And so I think that if I can uh, kind of show that, I've been showing that to hospitals. I have a big meeting tomorrow with the hospital about it. Show that it doesn't really work like that, and that you'll actually save a lot of money by having dedicated radiologists. I think that's where it's going to go. So I think the differentiator is showing that MDs controlling an MD field is more powerful than an MBA. I mean, to give you an example, one company I worked with, there was a radiologist who was making about 300,000 a month. And the pushback I got when I brought up his quality issues was, but he makes us so much revenue. We can't let go of him. He makes so much revenue. And so I think from an MBA perspective, it makes total sense. But if it was your mom, like if those MBAs, if their moms were in the hospital, who would they want reading their scan? The multi-billion-dollar revenue first profit over people company, or would they want an actual radiologist that is working for that hospital and is known by the physicians? That was my 2 minute ramble. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Oh yes, that was wonderful, and it emphasizes the concept of we used to call it patient ownership. You know, when you were a medical student, you were assigned a patient. That's your patient, and you need to know everything about that patient, and you need to stay with that patient through their hospitalization. So if any questions come up, you can answer that question. And to get that today is very difficult. That concept of accountability,
Right.
everything is kind of diffused. And this was one of the big objections that old guys like me had of the new system where residents have shift work. It's like, oh, all my residents go home at 5 o'clock and then a night float comes. We never did that. We just stayed there all night. Now, there was a downside to staying there all night for sure. Um, but the concept that you're done at 5 really does not align well with the concept of ownership and accountability. You know, it's like, well, it's almost 5 o'clock. The next guy can do that. I mean, that's human nature. So these things have to be, I think, really thought about carefully so that the patient's interests are always at the top, which I think a lot of people would agree with our current system is not often the case.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think if there's appropriate handoff of care, technically the night float team will still own the patient. But I definitely see what you're saying. I mean, when I was at Stanford and I did the inpatient ward and we had people on ketamine infusions and other stuff, I was the only provider for 24 hours a day, so I really got to know patients, especially when they're detoxing. You know, a guy who he had 2,500 microgram fentanyl patches and 5 stacks of 5 across him, and I really got to know him when I took all those patches off him and detoxed him. And the nurses were running away from me because I had this glove with like a ball of like it was like a basketball of fentanyl patches. And I was like, what do I do with this? And they're like, do not touch with that, I'll faint. So there's an advantage of that versus a night float team for sure. But I think that's what you're going to see in the future is that cost could go down in some ways when you have it's at least I'm just speaking from radiology, not totally from clinical medicine, but when you have people that have the information with the patient are kind of integrated in the healthcare home, I think you could see indirect costs go down, such as communication breakdown, lawsuits, rereads, things like that. So,
Yes. Well, I'm not being categorically against the new system, just that there need to be guardrails so that handoffs are done properly.
yeah,
And, I don't think patient care necessarily suffers. And it can suffer if a doctor hasn't slept for a day or two as well. So, there's pros and cons. But I think we just have to be careful when we change things that the patient always stays the number one
right.
priority. And as you say, not the private equity company, which is a company that comes in and buys up things looking to make money. Private equity does not come in and buy 100 radiologists and say, "Wow, let's make patient care better. That's our goal," right? I mean,
They'll say it, but yeah, exactly. Their goal is growth and sell. So I agree with you. And PE bloat, a lot of like for example, for what I pay radiologists per study is about 40% more than private equity because there's no PE bloat. It's just I'm not doing this to extract value, but to create it. And so the radiologists are getting the money in the end of the day. I reserve funds for growth and other things, but my business model I think is more sustainable because I'm not there to drive up the P&Ls for 2 years insanely high and then show a potential buyer how good the company is. It's essentially I'm not trying to grow to be the biggest company. I'm growing to be the best. So that changes a lot of things in terms of employee values and everything.
Well, I really appreciate that there's at least one guy like you around, and there's probably a
Yeah,
lot of other ones that we don't know about who are just trying to do the right thing for patients, and that's kind of heartwarming and encouraging when we see so much of the opposite.
yeah.
Well, it's been a great discussion, Matt. Is there anything you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd add is that I think a lot of physicians, when they get out of training, they feel overwhelmed because it's the first time in your life you're really not being told what to do.
Mm.
80% of radiologists at least leave their job within 2 years and they go to another job. So don't feel like that the first job you sign on is you're locked in. And I also think that there's other dimensions of your life that you never developed because you're so focused on your career that will pop up. I mean, for me, I rode my bike across the country after my pain fellowship at Stanford because I saw patients that said if I had not had this horrific thing happen to me and I didn't get like erythromelalgia or something, like I would have done Y. And so I would realize that time is also an asset, not money, and to try to do something that you think you want to do. Because if you're just going to continue to jump through whole like hoops, the next hoop will be a grave eventually. So that's the main thing. And that physician burnout's real. Don't be a wimp about it. Anything else I'd like to add is people have different definitions of financial freedom. And I just be careful because I know Bitcoiners in Puerto Rico who net worth $200 million. They have all the money in the world, but now they don't necessarily have a sense of purpose. So there's definitely a lot of drug use by some of them because
Mm.
they're kind of like living life on cheat codes. There's nothing that gets them out of bed, because they feel like kind of existential about the whole thing. So that was a little disjointed, but yeah, that's what I'd add.
Well, I would agree with you that purpose, very, very important, and balance and taking advantage of time. It's one of the reasons I was swimming after humpback whales a few weeks ago in Tonga. That's something
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do, and it's not really part of my day job, but I thought it ought to get done, and so I made it a priority. Um, yeah, I think that just sounds like very mature, wise advice, and thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, what about, are you recruiting? Should somebody, is there a website people should go to if they are looking into this?
Sure. There's rightreadmd.com and I can give you the info. There's like the email address you could write is hello@rightreadmd.com. We're recruiting for our next wave will be about Q2 of 2026. And we are recruiting for some on-site positions um, currently. So you can reach me through there. I'm also on LinkedIn and Doximity if you don't want to go through all that. I check LinkedIn pretty regularly because that's how people connect with me. I'm also on Facebook, but it's a pretty threadbare profile. I'm not like the biggest fan of Facebook. I just think you're kind of, you decrease the depth of human connection through it. So it's ironic, but you probably would agree because you're not, I don't know,
I
but
get a little overwhelmed with Facebook. Um,
yeah.
so, but no neurologists. You're not recruiting yet for neurologists for Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
All right.
Not at the moment, but maybe in the future. I am looking for some hospitals are reaching out to me because of the pain background to build pain departments. And so if you're a neurologist that did pain fellowship, we should talk.
Okay. Okay. Well, Dr. Matthew Hermann, thanks for joining me on the
Yep.
art of medicine.
All right. Thank you.
And now a final thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com. Locumstory.com is a free, unbiased educational resource about locum tenens. It's not an agency. Locum Story exists to answer your questions about the how-tos of locums on their website, podcast, webinars, and videos. They even have a Locums 101 crash course. At locumstory.com, you can discover if locum tenens make sense for you and your career goals. What makes locumstory.com unique is that it's a peer-to-peer platform with real physicians sharing their experiences and stories, both the good and bad, about working locum tenens. Hence the name, Locum Story. Locumstory.com is a self-service tool that you can explore at your own pace with no pressure or obligation. It's completely free. Thanks again to locumstory.com for sponsoring this episode of The Art of Medicine. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is a professor of neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, other group, or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional, financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please follow on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Please share with your friends and subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com